Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Science of SaaS Startups podcast. Today, I'm talking to Vitaly Gordon. Vitaly is the CEO of Faros AI, which is an AI native engineering intelligence platform. Vitaly, welcome.
Hi, Ben. Great to be here.
So we always kick the podcast off just by asking a few questions to help the audience get to know you a little bit better as a person. So first question, if you could teleport to any place in the world right now, where would it be and why?
Great question. I think probably I know my brother just finished his visit to Thailand, and it's a place that I like. So maybe to join him there for his vacation, that would be great.
Have you been there several times, or was that the first visit?
Yeah, I've been there. It's kind of a place I like across many things. It's kind of Eastern enough to be exotic, Western enough to be, not too exotic, great food, great beaches. I just love that place.
Yeah, I've never had the chance to go yet, but definitely on my bucket list. So next question, what gets you, when do you get most inspired? So, might be when you're listening to music, watching films, reading books, or when you're working, or maybe something completely different.
Yeah, so I perhaps would give kind of a somewhat of a boring answer, but to be quite honest, when when I listen to kind of business podcasts, such as this one, and it's kind of hard kind of to even imagine that we have now trillion-dollar companies that start in a garage, right? Quite
Yeah,
literally.
yeah.
And so listening for that journey, how it takes, and just understanding that the origins of all these companies are kind of exactly the same. It's just a handful of people trying to kind of do something together, and eventually what it becomes, those kind of the situation I'm the most inspired by.
And I guess that's got a real kind of personal relevance to you because you're kind of doing exactly that right now.
Yep.
So if you could send a text message to yourself 10 years in the past, what would it say?
Well, the simplest answer is probably, kind of load up on various stocks. That would be kind of, one
That would
kind
make the
of,
startup journey a bit easier, wouldn't it? If you had some
yeah,
capital
definitely.
to throw it at. So.
And kind of, but if aside of kind of the obvious, I think that one of the things I kind of, as I age and matured, learned to accept even more, that it's okay to not have a very, detailed and defined plan in life, and kind of, your life takes you wherever it takes you. And, there are things that are happening, and, it's just kind of embrace the journey, I guess.
Yeah, that's really funny actually, because a lot of founders, I think, have a very similar kind of ethos in life, just kind of rolling with the punches, but seizing opportunity when they see it, I guess.
Yeah.
So if we jump into kind of Faros now, do you want to just kick things off by giving us an overview of business with Faros AI and, what specific problems you're trying to solve?
Yeah, so Faros AI is an kind of engineering operations platform that brings all engineering data in one place to give engineering leaders kind of a single pane view of their entire software development lifecycle. And it's a company that, as by now slightly over 4 years old, but it's kind of a culmination of all my experience on leading kind of engineering teams, and really to your audience that are comprised of many, sales professionals. It's really starking the difference of how badly engineering is managed compared to, let's say, sales. And while most engineers are graduates of like STEM fields, it's definitely the least data-driven function in kind of every company, but also in many cases the most expensive function in many companies.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the challenge that we're solving, because we believe if you buy into kind of the software is eating the world narrative or digital transformation, we have to get better at managing, engineering, and this is what Faros exists to help with.
Because you, prior to starting the business, you were with Salesforce, is that right?
Yeah.
So presumably there was some kind of pain that you were kind of feeling there on a daily basis and felt like we need to do this better, which kind of inspired kind of founding Faros.
Yeah, exactly. Because Faros is a truly world-class organization when it comes to sales and marketing, right? So I kind of had kind of front seat view to how, perhaps one of the best go-to-market organization is being managed, and just it kind of gave this very stark difference of how engineering is managed compared to like how the second part of also that is unique to my experience at Salesforce, also saw just how useful it is to have all of your data in a single system that you, and how much it helps to kind of be much more data driven, right? That system, in that company happened to be Salesforce, right? The system that we also were building, and me also kind of managing the kind of data and AI part of the company. I just realized of how useful that data is to provide kind of more insights and kind of more action items for those sales leaders. And I was saying, hey, I'm building all these things for our customer, but like I have none of it myself. And that's kind of what started the journey.
And in terms of kind of this industry, like software development, kind of analytics, there's it's obviously a big growth area at the moment. There's kind of several kind of software vendors coming to market here. Like, how do you position yourself within that market? Are you aiming at a particular segment of customers, or are you able to do something which other competitors aren't?
Yeah. So, it's always kind of a tricky question, especially as a at least I try to be a kind of a self-aware founder and CEO of a company that not, we're great, everyone else, is bad. But the reality of our category, the idea that I just presented is not novel at all, right? There have been, for probably for, 2 decades, people are talking about, if you think about kind of even the agile movement and kind of all that, they kind of, that was one way to try to solve this problem more kind of process oriented way by and I think that's good, but like agile to me is kind of like medpic for sales, is kind of talking about the process. But again, I don't think even if you have medpic but you don't have Salesforce, right? And the reality
Yeah.
is I think many of the companies that were trying to solve this problem focus kind of a little bit too much on the process, but not so much, and kind of and the idea was that if you trust the process, then the rest will happen. And we believe that, especially in an age where just there's so much data being created by all of the system, all of the a typical developer will work with dozens and dozens of systems in order to build software, and we have data from all the systems, so we can actually use data in order to kind of figure out, as opposed to just relying on a process. So what we decided to do differently, which was kind of haven't been really attempted before, is kind of to connect to all those systems. And the challenge there is that every single engineering organization would use a different set of system. And we kind of put as a goal that unless we are able to connect to all of them with no change in process on developer, because that is just the reality that no engineering organization will change the way they do things just to kind of adhere to some startups methodology. That was the challenging part that was really never tried before, and we can go into details on how we go about it. But the real challenge that I think kind of many companies have avoided, and we believe is inevitable, and you have to just face this challenge head on, is how do you provide a true holistic kind of picture, but you don't have the, like when this first CRM was created, there were no other systems, right? So that was the only kind of
Yeah.
the only system of record, and people just put their data in it. But we're now getting into, like I said, a reality where dozens and dozens of systems are being used, and and it's a different dozen, for every single company, and we have to live with it. And the solution is quite complex. That's why it took us 2 years of just R&D before we even started selling the product.
And do you see this as a business sale, or is it an IT sale, or are you having to talk to lots of different
Yeah.
people to get a deal done?
Yeah, so it's definitely a business problem, especially I would say, in the last 2 years since we had the, market correction and the kind of rising interest rate that kind of really put
Yeah.
efficiency right on the map. And if you think about from a kind of CFO or even, kind of CEO perspective, they already have a pretty good grasp on what does it mean to run an efficient sales organization or an efficient marketing organization. But like, engineering to a large degree is a black hole that it just incinerates cash, right? That is really, so there is like so many like, kind of low-hanging fruits. So that is kind of the problem that we're solving in. And however, as with most today engineering tools, kind of gone are the days where a CFO can or a CIO can just buy a bunch of Oracle licenses and then just force it on the engineering to utilize, right? So you have to get the engineering team, but like I said, thankfully, due to the market condition and other kind of tailwinds that we're now having with AI and kind of things like that that are kind of rethinking how these functions operate, we kind of get usually the buy-in of both functions.
And how do you see the market evolving? Like you touched on AI there. I think it's, kind of illegal to do a podcast now without talking about AI. Especially in your industry more than any other, I guess. How do you see things kind of changing over the coming years?
Yeah, so look, the thing is kind of well, there is a lot of hype. Eventually, I think everyone agrees that AI is not a fad, right? Like it's here to stay, and I think it will have a similar kind of impact, if not greater, than to what the cloud introduced in like completely change the way, or is kind of the PC when it was just introduced. So really, we're now, and this is kind of how our kids will look at us is imagine if you go to an office and you see someone still doing a spreadsheet manually on a piece of paper, right? It will be just so bizarre, right?
Yeah.
To see it. And we kind of entering that phase. We're just in a very very kind of early stage of that phase. So there will be winners, loser. There will be kind of a company rising from the ashes, but like everyone I'm saying needs to rethink how do they operate when kind of these amazing tools are now available to them.
And do you see like the role of the engineer changing at all? I sort of obviously like a lot of people involved in kind of software industries kind of really enjoyed sci-fi as a kid and Isaac Asimov,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of the kind of engineers in Asimov's books were more psychologists than kind of deep techie people, and I wonder, like with the kind of prompt engineering becoming more of a thing, whether the role of an engineer kind of is going to adapt and change in coming years.
Yeah, look, it will definitely change in kind of, I think in somewhat kind of a profound way, but we also kind of need to understand how it will evolve, because even if you look at, 20 years ago, engineers were doing a lot of things that today are completely people don't think about. Is like, for example, when kind of memory was really kind of a bottleneck for most programs, so you had engineers even writing code in almost assembly language just to kind of deal with memory. Now no one thinks about memory as a constraint anymore, and everyone can move on, and the memory is completely managed today by programming language themselves, or whatever processors, compilers, and whatever kind of version of the stack it is. I think still we kind of already realize if like just how much of a code that is written, if you now really take any program that you use today and really kind of unbundle it to all of its open source components, right, that are kind of being used, and all of the kind of or all of the APIs that use, whether it's a company like Stripe, Twilio, or anything else, I think you will realize that probably less than 1% of the code that in every is written by the engineers at that company, right? Because like probably
Yeah.
99% of it comes from kind of external, kind of the entire layer of that. And I think AI will just kind of take it one step further, that even within the things that um, kind of we today solve with open source, because like the problem with also kind of any open source solution, there is a certain kind of one size fits all, is like the creators of that software have to, but there is like it's not very dynamic. But some of the things that we will allow is to take code that's written and kind of using prompt engineering to adjust it exactly to my use case that maybe it didn't support. And so a lot of the work, the thing that AI probably would not be able to do for quite some time, because every time I said AI would not be able to do something, I was wrong eventually. But it's
Yeah.
but for quite some time, I think the innovation, like it's hard to imagine someone going to ChatGPT today and saying, create me a database that is like 10 times more efficient and performant than the state of the art today, right? That's just like
Yeah.
something, because a lot of the AI is really still kind of going and kind of reviewing historical data, right? So it's
Yeah.
trained on that historical data and code the same. So it will be more kind of making us efficient on the things that we already done many, many times. And I think the role of the engineers would be to move to, the next layer of innovation. For
Pushing
example, you might
boundaries.
ask AI, like, if I were to create a database that, is 10 times more efficient, like what would be the elements, right, that I should look at, right? And kind of things like that.
Yeah. Okay. So if we move on to talking about kind of the startup journey more generally, so you recently went through your Series A funding and kind
Yeah.
of closed that in recent days. How did you find the fundraising process? Did you notice any kind of clear differences from when you've raised money previously? We're obviously in a very different kind of fundraising environment or market right now.
Yeah. So look, it was definitely, different and far, let's say, harder, and because it was a kind of more advanced round. Obviously, there's more money kind of being raised, and throughout my also fundraising process, also Silicon Valley Bank collapse that was really created a lot of FUD with just every single investor had to like then troubleshoot their portfolio companies. However, in the grand scheme of things, I do believe that it's good for the industry, because the reality is there were just way too many startups getting funded, right? And there were like companies who really thought they had a great business, but in reality it was what was driving their business was kind of the low interest rates around the world,
Yeah.
right? They're just creating a lot of available cash. And what I actually enjoyed about the product and having us being able to raise that capital, it kind of also just another validation that we are working on a real business that is less kind of a function of current macroeconomic cycles, but it's kind of more, hey, this is a real problem, and we're solving it.
And in terms of kind of the startup journey, just thinking about kind of big challenges that you faced during that time, how do you kind of deal with those challenges, and kind of do you have specific strategies for overcoming them when things
Yeah.
go just terribly wrong and you have to start all over again?
Yeah. Look, there are just so many like every startup is kind of dead by default, right? It's kind of like
Yeah.
vast majority of them will die, right? And that's just the reality is you're kind of fighting for your life every day. So, and kind of those days, those challenges, including anything from how do you generate demand, right, for, your company, how do you service it, and how do you still innovate, and how do you do all of that now in a kind of far more efficient way than kind of you've done it before, when really everyone was just thinking that the next round of funding is kind of right around the corner. I think the thing, and I would say as a founder, right, is you kind of have to think and kind of try to be, because part of the founder journey is you have to be somewhat delusional, right? It just doesn't work if you're not. But also you have to be somewhat realistic and kind of think about it. Am I, solving kind of, a real problem? If I could wave a magic wand and restart, and like, all my employees are taking care of my investor and all of that, would I still be doing exactly what I'm doing
Mhm.
today? And if the answer is yes, then the next question is just, okay, let's just figure out, like, the bottleneck of the business, now. And if the answer is no, then my suggestion, by the way, to many founders is, like, don't waste the best years of your life on trying to kind of, squeeze water out of a rock, right? Like, just your investor will appreciate, like, just come and say, hey, you know what, we tried, it seemed to be working, it's not working, let's, kind of live to fight another day.
And when you think about product development in the business, obviously on the one hand, you want to be, incredibly innovative and kind of adapting to kind of, what your customers are telling you. But on the other hand, you need that stability in the product and to be a kind of a reliable partner to your customers. How do you balance those two things?
Yeah, so this is kind of uh, uh, it's a great question, because we are talking about it. We just finished also an executive offsite where kind of a variation of this question became. Um, I think most products that are end up, being kind of disruptive and really, game changing, are actually they're terrible product on, almost every other regard when they come in, right? The first iPhone that ever came out was terrible in terms of call quality, right? That wasn't really compared to, the Nokias of the world. And the first Tesla that came out was a really terrible car that you could only use as a toy, right? But eventually they kind of figure out one thing that kind of made it work. And I think this is really kind of, when I say, when I advise people in their startup pitches, like, I'm kind of, the one thing I'm trying to listen for is whether they use the word "and" in there. So if they say, oh, our product does 1 and 2 and 3, is I'm saying, like, okay, scratch that, and like figure out if there's like truly one thing that will be transformational. Because if you have that, and that is important, you will get the opportunity to build kind of the rest and catch up on all of that. But I think there are way too many companies that are kind of, really, their value proposition is that they claim they do like 5 things 10% better than, whatever the incumbent is. And I just find that this is just historically not how great companies are built.
So kind of find that North Star and kind of anchor the company around that.
Yeah, and that North Star has to be extremely, like, extremely differentiated, right? If you take about,
Yeah.
Amazon, by being like the first online bookstore that they had an amazing selection of, so that was the one thing that, drove customers. And then, everything else kind of, they figure out, like, what is this one thing? And that one thing does not need to apply for anything, but applies to, like, kind of a large enough population. Like, for example, for our businesses, like I told you before, where something that wasn't solved is how do you provide a truly, holistic platform where it doesn't just only take, one source of data, but take all of your data in order to kind of generate. That is the one thing that we decided. And kind of, at least for now, we're still proven that our customers appreciate that. It's this platform that really looks at all of their systems when deciding kind of what they should do next, as opposed to like giving it from a very tactical standpoint. So each company, and obviously some will get it wrong, but I'm saying it's important to have this one, because if you don't have it and you have just, kind of 5 things that are nice to have, like, I think in this environment it will be much harder to make a difference, given that incumbents are sucking more and more of the air out of the room
Yeah.
every time.
Okay. So last question. You, as we mentioned earlier, came from a background with Salesforce and before that with LinkedIn, sort of obviously both quite large companies. What lessons do you feel kind of helped you in kind of building a startup company coming from like those bigger corporate companies? And also, I'm sure there's lots of people in big companies who've got great ideas for startups. Kind of what would you say to them? Would you say never run a startup, it'll drive you mad, or would you say kind of go for it, but consider this?
Yeah, so let me start with the first one for people who, I think it's helpful a lot to have an experience with a large company when you go build a startup on really, two main ways. One is what good looks like. And like so many kids that drop out of college to start a company, like you just you're just guessing, right? Like
Yeah.
it's better to have now, whether you have 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, like it changes based on whatever you're building. If you're building a social network, sure, drop out of college, go for it. If you're building a semiconductor company, maybe spend 20 years in the industry. So it kind of depends, but like I'm saying that. But the second thing that I think people just truly don't understand, and this is where I feel where I'm so lucky, is your ability to recruit other people, right? Like for us, 70% of our employees work with me at Salesforce or LinkedIn, as you mentioned, like because people need to know if you want to truly get a world-class talent, which you need in many startups to be successful. Like there is something that you need to be able to tell them that while they're leaving their cushy job, right, in order to join
Yeah.
your crazy idea. And that is kind of one thing that you have to establish yourself a little bit, so for them to kind of manage the risk. I think on the other hand, from like a large company to a startup, I the the thing that I would say, it's an extremely humbling experience, and there is like very little, if not negative, correlation between your success at a large company and being able to actually succeed at a startup. So, like one of the things, and like I said, because we have so many employees from large companies, like really the first thing I do with every employee is like to beat out the like large company thinking out of their head, because like that
Yeah.
is it's so counterproductive. And so I would say that for kind of if you really want to quit a large company and go start a startup, just you have to have this French mindset and really kind of try to learn almost everything from scratch, because most of the things are like I said, negatively correlated with what the problems that you need to solve.
Yeah, great stuff. Okay, well, I really appreciate your time, Vitaly, and thank you for coming on and talking to us today. If people want to get in touch and talk about Faros AI, what's the best channel, best way to get in touch?
Yeah, just go to our website at faros.ai, or feel free to meet me on LinkedIn, or my handle at Twitter is the same, Vitaly Goran. So thank you for having me.
Great stuff. Okay, I really appreciate your time. Thanks, Vitaly.